Hello, everyone. My name is Sydney Krawiak, and I'm the Program and Outreach Coordinator at Peters Township Public Library. This program is being recorded and will be available to view again on YouTube and on PT Channel 7. Because this program is live, we are not able to provide additional tech support at this time. Everyone's camera and microphone are turned off for this presentation. You may utilize the chat feature to send in a question or to provide comments. Please send questions and comments to the Peters Township Public Library in the chat window. Questions and comments sent through chat will only be seen by our presenters and myself. At the end of the presentation, there will be time for questions, so feel free to send them in as they come to you. Thank you for joining us for the first installation of Stories from the Archives, Peters Township Farm Fair. Our presenters this evening are PTPL Archives staff Margaret Deitzer and consulting archivist Carolyn Friedrich. Margaret had previously worked as the reference librarian at Peters Township Public Library, but now she spends her time exclusively working in the archives with Carolyn. Carolyn is the consulting archivist for the Peters Township Public Library Archives through funding from the Peters Township Public Library Foundation. This evening, they will be presenting on Community Day's predecessor, the Peters Township Farm Fair. All the information presented tonight draws from the library's wealth of historical materials to provide a glimpse of the event in its heyday.
Thank you so much for that introduction. Let's get our screen up and started. All right, so we are happy to present what we hope will be the first of many sharing stories from the archives about the Peters Township Farm Fair. And a big thank you to you all for joining us this evening. While it really would have been wonderful to have been able to present this in person, we're glad you're able to join us over Zoom, and cross our fingers in the future we'll be able to do this in person and actually share the materials with you in the real, as they say. So jumping in a little bit about the Peters Township Public Library Archives before we begin. And this is some background on the work Margaret and I have been doing. So the archives contains photographs, documents, scrapbooks, newspaper clippings, artifacts, and ephemera, and much more, all documenting Peters Township from the late 19th century to the present day. So like most archives, our work with the collections often falls into two main categories, that is access and preservation. To preserve the collections, we've housed materials in archival quality containers like the boxes you see here on this slide or behind us in the archives room here in the library. And we've also stored the materials in archival quality folders, photo sleeves, and so on to protect them. This is really important for fragile items so that they're less likely to suffer damage as they are well housed and can be delicately handled now. We've been spending a majority of our time on providing better access to the collections. In kind of simple layman's terms, this is very thoughtful and careful organization is kind of the foundation of this. And then we write what is called a finding aid, which is a document that tells you everything you could possibly want to know about that particular collection. And this allows a researcher to decide if they want to make an appointment to come research in person with Margaret in the archives and see those items front and center. And this work is still underway, but the finding aids will be available online and in the library and are where you should go if you want to start researching in the library's collections here. Finally, we know that not everybody can or wants to set up an in-person appointment, which is why we are making selected items from the Peters Township Public Library Archives available online on PA Photos and Documents. PA Photos and Documents is a statewide resource for libraries and archives to share their historic content in one place. It's a really fantastic resource, and if you go to the library's website, you can find a way to navigate to PA Photos and Docs from there. Peters Township Library has two collections on this site. The main collection is for photographs and documents that we have digitized from the archival collections. Key to tonight's presentation, there is a 1957 Farm Fair program that has been fully digitized. So if you want to browse that later, you are quite welcome to. And we'd like to say keep an eye on this particular collection as we will continue to expand what is available online. The second collection that is on PA photos and documents from Peters Township is the library's oral history collection. These interviews were conducted in 2003 and were a very big catalyst for establishing the archives here. It's a really rich collection with a photograph of each interviewee, a typed transcript, and probably publicly available for the first time, the audio from these oral history interviews. They are absolutely fantastic. And we'd like to put in the plug that as we continue to work in the archives, we'd like you to consider donating to the library archives collections here. Even if you haven't been a Peters Township resident for decades upon decades, what I like to say is yesterday was history, so you may have items that are in fact fantastic for the archives here because everything is a piece of the puzzle to help us continue telling the story of Peters Township. So as I get ready to hand things over to Margaret here in a moment, I really would be remiss if I did not acknowledge her in-depth research that she has conducted in the archives here that really made tonight's presentation possible for us all. So with that, I'd like to hand it over to Margaret.
Well, thanks, Carolyn. And I join Carolyn in saying hello to everyone that is attending our program tonight. And also, we wish you were here with us this evening and looking forward to you attending in person our follow-up program. The quote from Mr. Haudenschild. Mr. Haudenschild is one of the participants on our oral history project, and you can listen to his oral history on the PA photos and documents, as well as read his transcript. These transcripts are also available to borrow in the library. So moving on to our program this evening. Oh, again, the sentiments expressed by Mr. Haudenschild there were shared by many that we spoke to about the Farm Fair, and also from articles that we've read about the Farm Fair. So our Farm Fair program this evening developed after Carolyn and I came across Farm Fair materials in several collections and were curious to find out more about this past event utilizing the materials in our archival collection. The Peters Township Farm Fair was one of the most important township events during the years 1944 to around 1960. The fair was organized by the Peters Township Protective Association, and this association began around 1918, and it was one of the earliest civic organizations in Peters Township. They supported projects related to the progressive development of the township's civic, welfare, and recreational needs to benefit the entire community. They raised several $1,000s in support of community projects with a special emphasis on youth-related activities. In addition to acting as the main organizer of the Farm Fair each year, the Protective Association took the leading role in the development of recreational facilities and programs in our township beginning around 1958. The Farm Fair was held on the grounds of the Peters Township High School, the location of the current Peters Township Middle School and administrative offices. This annual August event celebrated the end of the growing season. The fair featured a variety of both indoor and outdoor competitive events, such as competitions for the best farm products, vegetables, fruits, canned and preserved goods, flowers, and floral arrangements. On the fairgrounds, exhibits and competitions included livestock, farm machinery, and programs to learn about new farming methods and products. The goal of the Farm Fair was to encourage best practices in gardening, farming, and home economics, as well as to bring the community together. Entertainment at the farm fairs included pet shows, races, parades, music, and dancing, with square dancing often the grand finale and closing event in the earliest years of the farm fair. Horse races and horse shows proved popular events, even as the township became more suburban. Another quote. This quote came from the Commerce News in August 1955. With the thought of advancing and encouraging the development of gardening, farming, and home economics, it is felt that through the medium of this fair, a spirit of fellowship and goodwill can be promoted.
So how did the fair start off?
The opening ceremonies. Each year, the farm fair officially opened with a flag ceremony with different organizations presenting the colors. An opening parade followed the flag ceremony. We know in later years, selecting a farm fair queen became part of the opening festivities. You can see the 1958 farm fair queen, Pat Gilday, here in the photo on the right. It can be said that the selection and crowning of a farm fair queen began to take on a life of its own. For example, in 1955, the farm fair queen was selected from a local model agency and a public relations firm. In later years, the Kiwanis clubs, I should say, because it was the Peters Township Kiwanis Club, the Canonsburg Kiwanis Club, and another neighboring Kiwanis Club that selected the farm fair queens. Once they were selected, they did take on a major role in the farm fairs, beginning with the opening ceremonies.
All right, you'll probably hear this many times tonight, but horses and horse-related events played a major role in the farm fair, and this is true from the very beginning. At first, they were just kind of part of the general events supporting good husbandry that were kind of, as we said, the main focus of the farm fair, supporting all the good farm practices, and also just the fact that horses were a commonplace part of farm life in the area. But as we looked through the materials, it became clear that later on in the life of the farm fair, the competitions really expanded, and horse-related competitions ultimately became the featured events at the fair. So on the maybe lighthearted side of things, they had horse games for both adults and children, and some of the ones we found were junior and senior musical chairs, somehow conducted upon horseback. I'm not quite sure how that would work out, but I can imagine. And an adult egg and spoon race, also on horseback, and many, many other races. Races were a big part of the farm fair. And we found that even though Peters Township was starting to move away from its agrarian roots by the time the farm fair concluded in the late 1950s, the last one we found evidence of was in 1960. But even still, the increasingly suburban community still took a lot of pride in showcasing the fine horses from the local area. And this 1958 quote from a sports commentator we thought was really great, because he said he didn't think he'd ever seen so many horses in a single place outside of a Western movie, and thought even the Western ranchers would be quite impressed with the number of horses that were present in the township as part of this.
Okay, now we talked about the horses, so we can talk a little bit about the inside exhibits. One major attraction was the West Penn Power Company. They offered a cooking school and actually conducted cooking classes at the farm fairs. Employees from the West Penn Power Company also served as judges for several of the home economics and the gardening competitions. Inside the Peters Township High School gymnasium, it was filled to capacity with displays and exhibits supporting best practices in home economics, competitions for best baked goods, jellies, jams, preserves, and along with gardening competitions and floral ranging. The fair also had categories for arts and crafts such as painting, ceramics, photography, and various types of needlework. So looking at the slide, you can look over on the left, it's a Peters Township Century Club in front of their exhibit in the arts and crafts category. Then if you look at the below, at the bottom of the slide there is the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce, and they operated a concession stand at the farm fairs. If you look over to the right, that's the document that Carolyn referred to is online. You can look at it through that PA Photos and Documents. What I personally find interesting in this document is a Peters Township street map. And because I've lived here for a few years, certainly not one of the persons who lived in the earlier days, but enough that I would have expected to have found my street in there, but it was not. So anyway, the Farm Fair program has lots of valuable information in it that was really relevant to those living in the township at that time. So that's something that you can enjoy if you access PA Photos and Documents.
All right. And so there are a lot of events to enter, and a lot of organizations and clubs were involved in the Farm Fair. And we found this on kind of both ends of the spectrum. A lot of clubs would be involved in helping to plan and organize and just kind of all the logistics and work that goes into hosting an event quite this large. But then also a lot of clubs and organizations entered into the competitions themselves. So these are just two examples from the archives here that we found. On the left-hand side, these are photos from the Peters Township Women's Club, a scrapbook we have here. And these were from 1954. The photo on the top, they entered an American Home Committee display table. And then the photo on the bottom was another women's club display table. And according to the scrapbook, they took first place in 1954 for this display here. On the right, we have a newspaper clipping with a display from the Peters Township Grange, another farm-related kind of community club and organization in the area. So they certainly integrated very well with the farm fair. And we see here the local McMurray Boy Scout troop posed with this display. So if we have all these things you can enter into as farm fair participants, and categories for everything, races, and all kinds of events, what would you win? Well, one of the things we found in abundance in the archives were farm fair ribbons. These in particular come from the Frobe family collection, and based on the sheer number of ribbons in this family collection, we can only guess that they probably entered the farm fair in some category or another pretty much every year, and they must have done very well because it looks like they took a ribbon almost every year. In Margaret's research, we dug up that it was really interesting that notably anyone could enter the farm fair events. So if you're from Washington County, Allegheny County, didn't matter, you could join in the Peters Township Farm Fair. However, only Peters Township residents could be award winners, because not only did you get a nifty ribbon like those seen here, newspaper articles from the time list fair prizes like for children's events on horseback or related to horses, the children could win a silver dollar. This occurred covering the war years, so war bonds were a popular prize. Home goods like bedspreads, blenders, grills, and even a freezer were up for grabs in various categories. And two more interesting ones were a Remington Rep shotgun, and my favorite, imagine entering the fair and winning your very own Shetland pony to take home.
An event, a pet show. To me, one of the most delightful events of the Farm Fair was probably the pet show. As you can see from these slides, many children brought their pets for judging. In 1958, Dr. Gates, a veterinarian and a pet show judge awarded prizes for several categories. There was a category for dogs, there was a category for cats, and then there was a category for unusual pets. In that year, 1958, some of the unusual pets were goats, raccoons, rabbits, land turtles, and ducks. Again, that was for 1 year, and I'm sure they had some additional unusual pets in some other years.
And I believe the library just held its modern day version of the pet show, Peters Township Pet Show, on Sunday. I believe Sydney announced the award winners, and 3 of these lucky modern day pets will be the library's mascots for this summer's Tales and Tales Summer Reading Challenge. So stay tuned to the library's social media to see more about the modern day pet show and its winners.
Races were a big part of the farm fair from the very beginning to the end. So the farm fair must have been particularly exciting for children, as they could enter so many events. Many of those events catering to children included field day activities, such as relay races, potato races, other sack races, wheelbarrow races. One of the largest races was the soapbox derby. The soapbox derby races occurred on East McMurray Road. If the races occurred today, the library reading room would provide a good spot to watch the races as they traveled west on East McMurray Road to the intersection with Valley Brook Road. We will show a short clip of one of these races towards the end of our presentation.
So, if you haven't heard enough about all the things you could enter, we wanted to put up this 1958 schedule of events from the Farm Fair program so you could just see the variety of things that were happening and to really drive home the point that this wasn't just an afternoon or a long day activity. In the early days, I think it was a 2-day event, and by the end here, or towards the end of 1958, I should say, it was a 3-day event with themed days for women, family, children. So it really was quite a massive thing to coordinate and move through within the township. And wanted to point out here on the right-hand side, you can see that the main event of the fair is the horse show. And so this was the kind of big grand finale and conclusion to the fair, which differs from the early years where the fair concluded with live music and square dancing. So we just kind of saw this throughout our research, that there's this kind of shift from the farming community into the more suburban community. But horses were kind of the mainstay and really what the fair began to coalesce around at this time. And we also found in papers from the time, they said the fair attracted many people from beyond the township, particularly for the horses. And one newspaper account credited the farm fair with helping to grow the township as people would visit the fair, see what a wonderful place Peters Township was, and decide to move here. And while we can't necessarily quantify that or really fix a number on how influential the farm fair was towards that end, we do know that it is true the township population more than doubled between 1950 and 1960, which made Peters Township the fastest growing community in Washington County at the time. So as you see here, more about kind of the changes to the farm fair over time. Again, pointing out in 58, because the horse show was so central to everything, they actually changed the title of the entire fair to include the free farm fair and horse show. However, we were sussed out a little bit of controversy that they were bringing in outside judges. They changed the rules so perhaps outside people could enter and could then win prizes. So it was a little bit of a hubbub, and in 1959 they changed it back, but horses were still very important to the farm fair. We also noticed over time that the farm fair increasingly became a place to see and be seen, particularly for local leaders in Peters Township. So we have 2 clippings here of folks showing up in convertibles, really dressed to the nines. So it really became quite a big event in kind of a social standing sort of way. For example, the one group of folks had just arrived from the local country club, so they'd go there and arrive in style in all their finery. And in addition, the emphasis on the farm fair queen as kind of a sort of beauty pageant, and then host everything. So it wasn't something you walked around in your casual clothes necessarily. And finally, we want to note that in 1958, we keep bringing up this year, but it was a very important year because the Protective Association really worked hard to rally the community organizations and clubs in the township to be involved in this year's farm fair, because the Protective Association were working to unite the community around a central goal to create a community recreation center in Peters Township. And so the farm fair played a very large role in that, in trying to just kind of get everybody united and on the same page and supporting this common goal for a rec center.
Before I move on to new beginnings, from a personal perspective, looking and studying at the archives gives one the opportunity to take a trip down memory lane and relive some of these great memories of growing up in the township. But another fact is how important this is to those that might really want to learn and to research the changes that occurred in the township, and particularly, as Carolyn mentioned, almost a doubling of the population over the 10-year history of the Peters Township Farm Fair. So again, it's a great trip down memory lane, but it's also an opportunity to study the demographics and to study the way of life. And the early farm fairs will tell you who the major groups were: the Grange, the Society of Farm Women, you had the Boy Scouts, the Girl Scouts, you had a Red Cross group, and you had, again, many of the kinds of exhibit differ greatly from towards the end when the changes really occurred. While there were fewer groups that participated in the farm fair and it opened as a one-day event, in later years, towards the ending, it became a 3-day event. And almost every association and organization in the township participated in the farm fair, and it became a big community event. So before I go into like what's ahead, just take a look at the biggest change that occurred. The farm fair appeared to have ended in 1960. According to records in the archives, tremendous crowds attending the farm fair raised concern about insurance liability. This liability issue probably contributed to the Protective Association's decision to end the sponsorship of this annual community event. Now we can take a look at what happened next. And again, our program tonight really featured on the farm fair. Not that we could even begin to cover all of it, but we tried to give you just a glimpse of some of the major attractions that occurred and events. But moving on, the first Kiwanis Community Day occurred on July 4th, 1962. Reed Day, an early member of the Kiwanis Club and an attorney for the school district, suggested that the Peters Township Kiwanis Club host a 4th of July program to keep community residents off the roads on July 4th, particularly Route 19. At that time, Route 19 was a 3-lane road, and Reed Day referred to Route 19 as a death trap. The Kiwanis Community Day differed drastically from the farm fair, particularly in its featured events, which included a chicken barbecue, carnival events, children's Olympics, Duncan stool, antique show, ending with a gigantic fireworks display. But to be sure, it was the Kiwanis chicken barbecue and the fireworks that drew Peters Township families to this July 4th event. and this ran until 1969. From that point, we know another community event was hosted by the Peters Township Chamber of Commerce. And you remember earlier, they were involved with operating a refreshment stand in the farm fair. We also know that in 1981, the Peters Township Recreation Department joined with Peters Township Chamber of Commerce to host a community day in the township. During this time, the focus of the event shifted again to feature local businesses in the Peters Township community.
All right, so up next, these are short clips that we took from a farm fair film that is in the archives. The film itself is about 22 minutes long, and it features a compilation of several years worth of recordings of the farm fair. So it's a lot of the same things over and over, just this time from 1952, this time from 1953. But we cut out a few samples here just to give you a sense of what the farm fair looked like. There isn't any audio here. The audio didn't correspond with the time period, and so we thought it best to leave the audio out. These are some of the horse-related events from 1953, and you can see the number of people kind of lined up watching, and just the outdoor arena that was used for some of these outdoor events in this case. So competitions both for just horsemanship, quality of the animal, things like that. And you have here some judges judging the children's entries in this particular clip. All right, and there's a short clip of one of the foot races that we cut off there because we wanted to instead show you this race. This race is from 1952, and it's one of the Derby races Margaret told you about earlier. This is on East McMurray Road, and you can see they blocked off the road, and people would park along the sides and line up to watch the children race. And it's really interesting to kind of look at the various designs, the different cars came in and what the children came up with. We were commenting that they probably have to wear a whole lot of protective gear and helmets in the modern day. And really anything, this kid, I think, is riding a chair down East McMurray Road. So designs came in all shapes and flavors there. But we thought that was a really great clip, and there's several more really exciting Derby races. So if you want to watch the whole thing, just make an appointment with Margaret, and she'd be happy to set up a viewing if you're interested in watching more. And our final clip of the evening starts with this gentleman. We're not really sure what he's up to, probably hamming around here. But this begins with a great banner across the road advertising the farm fair. And it is the pet show from 1953. So you see the dogs and cats. You might spot a few other animals in there. I believe we had a goat. There's something in a cage there, maybe a bird. And then, of course, the ponies. So we thought that was too cute not to share. We suggested, maybe the library holds the next pet show in person, and we can laugh at corralling all those animals. So to conclude, from the 1957 Farm Fair program, we know that summer is almost over when we meet at the Township Fair. We'd be remiss if we didn't thank the Peters Township Public Library and the Peters Township Library Foundation, not only for the support of the archives and the work that we're doing here, but for supporting us as we did a lot of research in the archives to bring you all this evening. We'd also like to say special thanks to Kelsey and Carrie for their help on this presentation. And we wouldn't be doing it right if we didn't cite our sources. So this is what we used in the archives. You are more than welcome to set up an appointment and we'd be happy to share more with you. So we utilize the oral histories with Reed Day, Charles Hodenshield, and Elma Johnston from 2003, as well as several collections of family and personal papers and the Women's Club of Peters Township papers. So at this time, we'd like...
Yeah, Carolyn, could you just switch back a comment about that slide?
Sure.
Before, the one right before that. Over on the right, again, from that 1958 program, I do believe, the award winning for the race, that was what Carolyn referred to earlier. In later years, the horse, there was a horse show event that concluded the event. And that particular one, it is a farm fair, it is the Grange Queen. She was a Grange Queen for 5 counties. I believe her name was Phyllis Napper, and she was a 5-county Grange Queen. So not only did the Peters Township Fair Queen preside at events at these farm fairs, but the Grange Queen also participated. And again, she was a 1958 graduate of Peters Township High School and was chosen as a Grange Queen for 5 counties. Thanks, Carolyn.
Sure. I think we're going to stop sharing here so that we can hopefully...
Okay. Before we move into questions and comments, I have something to share with everyone, and I'm sure how well you can see it on your screen, but I'd like to take a moment to share a piece of history that you can take home with you. Margaret has worked with the Peters Township Public Library Foundation to select 10 images for print, and now you can purchase these note cards and own a special piece of Peters Township history. Funding for this project was made available through the Library Foundation, and note card sets of 10 are available for purchase for $10 at the circulation desk. You can purchase them by card, check, or cash. Just make sure your cash is an exact change, and all proceeds will benefit the PTPL Archives. And photographs appear courtesy of the Lattimore, Hutchison, Douglas, Matthews, J and N McMurray, Liebarger, T. McMurray, Roach, and Frobe families, and can be found in the PTPL Archives.
All right, well, feel free to drop any questions in the chat. And we just want to make another plug that we'd love it if you'd search out your attics and closets for any items that you might feel free to donate to the Peters Township Public Library Archives. Like I said before, you know, we often think of history of these things of like late 19th century, early 20th century, all this really, really old stuff. And while we absolutely love that, you know, we also need to document Peters Township in the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and into the present day, because if we don't save it today, what's going to be there 50 or 100 years for future researchers and future residents to peruse. So even if it's kind of new and recent, don't be afraid to possibly drop it by. Like I said, we're trying to document all areas of the township, all walks of life, and that includes every time period too.
And another comment I can make is I referred to the farm fair was held at the Peters Township High School, which is on the current grounds of the middle school and the administration offices. However, we all know that both the administration offices and the Peters Township Middle School will be relocating to the former Peters Township High School, which has moved across the street and a little further east. And also, I know Carolyn and we've done quite a bit of review of materials, so we really look forward to some of your comments, because there's some questions I'm just dying to answer that we couldn't put in the...
Margaret knows it all. Text Margaret.
Well, one of the things I really liked was we got this letter in the in our archives, and I was reading the letter to Carolyn. I says, we better talk about this. And I'm not sure that we should, because it would just confuse ourselves as well as our audience. But it turns out the location of the farm fair appeared, according to this gentleman that wrote this letter in 2006, he talked about all these farm fair events that were held on this side where the library is. And the fact that the indoor exhibits were held in the municipal building. So then I read it in another transcript. So there has to be something to it. And especially that comment, which I mentioned because the crowds really did grow, but tremendous crowds. And I do believe that there were tremendous crowds. And I have a sense that the farm fair was held not only across the street where the current middle school is, but I think it expanded over here. Now, some of you may know, not really farm fair related, but this Peters Township Library exists on property that was owned by the school district. And I think Tom McMurray signed up. I don't know for portion of he's here with us tonight. But when I was looking at materials about the history of the Peters Township ambulance, I learned that the ambulance sits on Peters Township High School property that was donated to the township for the exclusive use of the Peters Township ambulance service. So
we had a comment come in that says, I believe that one year the fair was held behind the current library on the site of the old high school football field. So,
oh, good.
That's someone's recollection.
Yeah, that football field kind of brings up another anecdote. When we talked about the Protective Association changed its goal or its objective, the 1958 Peters Township Farm Fair, they rallied the entire community, and they rallied all these organizations to get behind planning for a central recreation programs and a centralized location. And if you recall, some of you may, it was 1957, the year before, the Peters Township Women's Club garnered support from these very same organizations, and the Peters Township Library was founded. But when you look at this farm fair over the years, and you look at the impact in later years of the horse and the horse shows, and again, I think Carolyn mentioned how the population doubled in that time period. When there was discussion of what the planning was for a Peters Township Recreation Center, they put a survey in the newspaper. And part of the comments around this survey was when they went it over on this property, they would have the tennis court, which is here now. They would have baseball fields. They would have a pavilion. They would have a football field. However, it was stipulated that when that football field was not in use, horse races were to be scheduled on that football field. So it goes to show this Peters Township community has always held a fondness for horses, horse racing, and horse shows. So any other questions or topics you might want to?
I had another question come in. What does it mean to be a Grange Queen?
Okay, let me just...
We knew this one was coming because I asked about it myself to have a farm fair.
Yeah. Yes. So I think Carolyn said I'm going to ask you that question. So here, let me just tell you what. First of all, the Peters Township Grange was founded in 1941, and one of our oral history participants, Mrs. Hutchison, was a founding member of the Grange. So the Granges were organized at the state, county, and local levels with membership open to all farmers and their families. Its aim was to advance the political, economic, and social interest of the nation's farmers. The Granges assisted farmers by providing a forum for discussion of knowledge regarding new agricultural methods. So while I cannot tell you what a Grange Queen or how she was elected, well, I know the counties elected their own Grange Queen. I can tell you what their objectives were. But again, I just think it's just great that the Peters Township graduate was not only the local Grange Queen, but for 5 counties. So that's the best answer I can give for that question.
I think the modern day equivalent would be something akin to a mix between a prom queen and maybe a beauty pageant winner, where you're not only crowned, but then you have duties to conduct at things like the fair. I believe the farm fair queen or Grange queen were often the women that would go around and hand out the prizes, hand out the awards, the ribbons, that sort of thing. So very good, kind of local debutante-esque sort of function to go around and hand out these awards.
And also, when we're talking about the Grange and farming practices, I would be remiss, I guess, if I didn't mention there was a 10-year community event prior to the farm fair, and that was hosted, or I guess it was the Peters Township Society of Farm Women that hosted that event. And in the early years, they joined with the Peters Township Protective Association to work with them and to volunteer with them to bring about that first farm fair. And in that early year, it was a one-day event. Any more comments?
Just a few about people's recollection. And again, if you have any history that you want to share with Carolyn and Margaret, feel free to reach out to them. Everybody will get a follow-up email after this evening's program that includes Margaret's contact information. So if you have anything that you'd love to contribute to the archives, feel free to reach out to her.
Please do.
Well, thank you very, very much for attending and allowing us to share not only the farm work or the farm fair, but also telling you about what we're doing in the archives, what we're doing with the collections that we receive, and how we're now focusing on our efforts to make these resources available to you, both in the library and digitally, through what Carolyn has been focusing on adding to PA photos and documents. So we hope you enjoy reading that one collection that's up there on the Oral History Project. I think there's 21 or 22 transcripts that you can listen to and also read, to listen to and read them. So thank you again.
I'd like to do that. Thank you for joining us tonight. We are always happy to share more. So please reach out. Don't be a stranger. And it's a great history, both what we shared tonight and so much more. So stop on by sometime.
Thank you, guys. And again, a follow-up email will be sent with information about when this recording will be available, as well as a link to that farm fair program from 1957 that Carolyn and Margaret referenced, plus our post-program survey to find out feedback from this program to help us make more informed decisions when planning for future programs. So thank you all so much for joining us, and have a great evening.
Thanks, Sydney.
Thanks.